This video is brought to you by Squarespace. In my last video, I talked about Army Painter Speedpaints, how Army Painter hired me and 4 other YouTubers to help improve the paints, help them come up with colors for the upcoming release, as well as how the entire line is being reformulated to help reduce reactivation. And while I'm still waiting on Army Painter to send me samples of their new formulation, I thought this would be a great time to make a video about one of the things this paint line already does really well: Speedpaint skin tones. So in this video, I'm going to show you all the skin tones I was able to achieve with the starter set, the mega sets, as well as all the prototype colors from the new wave that Army Painter sent me that I thought could be used as skin tones. Let's start with the core set. In the core set, we only get one paint with skin in the title. This is actually a bit misleading, as we actually get 5 different paints that could be used for 5 different skin tones. Out of these 5, 4 of them are contained within the starter set, which is really nice. 3 of them work perfectly with just a single coat and nothing else, while the other 2 require a little bit more fussing around with to look good as skin tones. And let's start with the darkest skin tone, Dark Wood. This color is the darkest brown color available in the entire Speedpaint range, including the new prototypes. I think it's a really good color overall, and you can see here with just a single coat of this color over a white undercoat, we get some really great results. I'm gonna give this one an A+, I really like it. Let's move on to the next one. Hardened Leather. This one is a great medium brown with a slight orange tinge to it, and once again with just a single coat over a white primer. I think it works really great as a nice medium skin tone. Once again, this one works really great, A+, no notes. Next up, we have the only color in this line with the word skin in it, and for those of you who are curious, I've already spoken to Army Painter about this, and in the next line of paints, we're going to have colors in a larger variety of skin tones with the word skin or flesh in the title. But anyway, Crusader Skin is a really great light skin tone right out of the bottle. It works great over some white primer and gives you the highlights and shadows that you would want out of this sort of skin tone. A+, no notes. Finally, we come to the last skin tone available in the starter set, and this one's not really intended to be a skin tone, but I found it can work really well with some slight adjustments. And that color is Pallid Bone. So as you're painting it onto the model, it is looking good. It's kind of a nice pale skin tone, but you will notice that once it's dried, it sort of looks a little bit off, a little bit unnatural. And in my opinion, I think that's just because it has a little bit too much of a greenish tone and no real warm undertones. Fortunately, there is a quick fix for this, which is to apply some magenta shading into the recesses. You could use any magenta wash for this, but sticking with the Speedpaint starter set, we might as well use the magenta Speedpaint that's on the market today, Purple Alchemy. And I like to just thin this down with a bit of Speedpaint medium, maybe a 2-to-1 mixture of medium to Purple Alchemy. And once I have this mixture, I like to go back in and apply it into all of the recesses on the skin. And you don't even really have to wait until the Pallid Bone is fully dry for this. In fact, it works a little bit better, I find, if you don't give it that much time to dry. And I like to just blend this into the Pallid Bone color using my brush. And you can see just by adding a little bit of magenta in the right places, it really helps balance out those greenish undertones. If you like, you can also use a slightly damp brush to reactivate some of the skin tone on the places you would want highlights, like the tops of the arms or the fingers, to create highlights or to help blend the magenta into the Pallid Bone color. And once this is done, you can see we've got a much more fleshed out skin tone that has a nice bit of difference from the other ones that we have in the set. And honestly, applying this technique to pretty much any of the skin tones is going to immediately make them look better and more alive. Here's some footage of me doing that to all of the other skin tones, and you can see what I mean. However, what I haven't been telling you is that there's an even easier way to do this. I just didn't want to go into that right away. I wanted you to first see what it looks like to put the skin tones straight over white primer. But what I like to do with pretty much all of my skin tones using Speedpaint is to first apply the magenta into the recesses over a white primer, and then after that, apply whatever skin tone that I want. Here you can see I've done this with INSTA Malcorian, applying the magenta into the recesses first, and not even really waiting until the magenta is fully dry, and then applying a single coat of Pallid Bone on top of that. And you can see when it's fully dried, it creates this really nice looking skin tone with a lot of depth to it. Moving on, I'd like to show you the final potential skin tone in the Speedpaint core set, as well as all 8 potential skin tones in the Army Painter prototype set that they sent me. But if you'd rather not sit through the entire video and you would just like a nice clean reference document showing you all of my skin tone experiments with different speed paints labeled and laid out for you so that it's easy to reference, you could always go and check out howlcorp.com/speedpaintskin. I've actually assembled quite a few different reference documents over on my website for you to use at your leisure, and it has been extremely quick and easy for me to put this together using this video's sponsor, Speedpaints. Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one website creation platform that I've been using for over a decade now for any of my website needs. You just select a template that looks good to you, drag and drop any elements you might want on your site, and then customize the page to your liking with no coding or technical knowledge required. You can even create your own store on Squarespace quickly and easily like I did, and fill it up with a bunch of your own products or even products from different print-on-demand services that are compatible with Squarespace. There's quite a few, it turns out. So if you're curious, why not check out squarespace.com today for a free trial? And when you're ready to take your website live, go to squarespace.com/DanaHowell for 10% off your very first order of a website or domain. Moving on, let's take a look at the final potential skin tone in the Army Painter core set, Sand Golem. This is one of the paints that is only available in the Mega set, meaning the larger set that's got all the paints in it, and I would say it's definitely not intended to be a skin tone, but it is a desaturated orange color. It's actually pretty similar to hardened leather, so I wanted to see if I could make it work as a skin tone, even though it is a little bit more saturated than I would like. So once again, it applies well. It's looking pretty good as a skin tone, but again, once it dries, it just doesn't feel quite right. It's just a little bit too saturated in my opinion. But we can apply the same techniques to this color that we applied to our Pallid Bone skin tone, applying a magenta wash and using some water to add in some basic highlights using reactivation. And once it's done, you can see it's back into more of a recognizable skin tone category, but honestly, I think it looks a little bit better if you mix either a little bit of brown into it or a little bit of the Crusader skin into it. I don't know, that's just my personal preference. And by the way, that's another thing I wanted to mention here is that pretty much any of these 5 skin tones you can mix with each other and you can create entirely new skin tones. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how all of these original Speedpaint skin tones work, but once again, they look much better if you add in just a little bit of magenta to each of them to give them that little bit of life. Finally, with the existing Speedpaint skin tones out of the way, let's get into the really exciting part, the brand new skin tones from the Army Painter Speedpaint prototypes that they just sent me. There are 8 of these colors that I'd like to evaluate, and once again we are going to start with the colors that I think are most likely to make good skin tones, moving from dark to light. The first one here is probably one of my favorites that we got in this new prototype line, and it's this really nice warm and dark brown color. It flows really well and it's clearly intended to be a skin tone. You can see in terms of tone, it falls somewhere between dark wood and hardened leather, but unlike both of those colors, I believe this one will actually have the word skin or flesh in its name, hopefully. This one is probably my favorite of all the new prototype skin tones, A+. Love this paint, no notes. Next up, we have a similar color, but just a little bit lighter. This one is a bit less orange, a little bit more magenta, and once again, it flows really well, giving us lots of natural shadows and highlights, and is, in my opinion, distinct enough from the other skin tones that it earns its place on this roster. A+, once again, I really love this one. After this, we have the lightest of the dark skin tones, and this one is just a little bit cooler in tone than the other ones, as opposed to the warm tones. But I still think this one makes a really great skin tone and a nice contrast from the other 2 new skin tones that we got. A+, no notes. Finally, we have the last paint among the prototypes that I feel confident is intended to be a skin tone, and this one is a slightly warmer, slightly light orange skin tone. And once again, this one performs well and is different enough from the other lighter skin tones to be worth adding to the roster. This one as well gets my grade of A+, very good skin tone, no notes. After this, we have 4 remaining colors that I think might be able to be used as skin tones, but I haven't tested them out yet, and I'm not really sure if that's what they're intended for. So we're gonna test these out and see how they look. Up first, we have these 2 pale desaturated brown colors, and after a single coat, I have to say I'm not a huge fan of these 2 as skin tones. In general, the result we're getting here could be done better by mixing 1 or 2 of the existing skin tones together, but just for experimentation's sake, let's see what these 2 look like after we give them the magenta glaze treatment that we gave some of the other core set skin tones. It's definitely better, but it's still not really doing it for me. If anything, they look maybe a little bit too magenta now. In conclusion, I think we could use these 2 as skin tones, but overall I feel like they are just a little bit too desaturated to portray the depth that I typically want from painting skin. Our next potential skin tone, meanwhile, has the opposite issue. It's a great color, but it's a little bit too saturated for a human skin tone, although I do feel this could definitely be useful as a blush or an accent color for various skin tones, or even to replace that magenta undertone that we've been using. And finally, we come to the very last color of the prototypes that I thought might be useful as a skin tone. And this one I was actually the most skeptical of, but it was actually the one that surprised me the most. And after applying a coat of this to my favorite vampire in recent memory, I really like how it ended up looking. It's a little bit more magenta than I would usually tend to go with in a skin tone, but after a few highlights, I think it works really well. Wasn't expecting this one to work well as a skin tone, but I'm glad that I tried. That's why I tried out all these different paints, because you never know which one is going to look good as a skin tone. So what did you think of all these skin tones? Which ones were your very favorites, and which ones did you think were missing from the range? Like I've said before, Army Painter wants me and the other members of the paint development team to create new colors to be made as official speed paints, so please let me know if there are any other skin tones you would like to see, and I will try to mix some up for you. Thank you so much to Squarespace for sponsoring this video, and thank you as always to all of our lovely, generous patrons for helping support the making of videos for this channel. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what new speed paint colors that you want to see in the new range, and I will see you in the next video. Okay.